Almost.
All right, great. We're live. So, good afternoon, everyone that is watching us today. We're Families for Freedom, and today we are here to have a conversation about racism and immigration. Um, our intention today is not to necessarily offer a solution or concrete answers to any of these topics or issues related to these topics, but more so of a reflection and a collective conversation of our personal experiences and our work experiences in the field of immigration and the issues related to race that come with it. With that, I think one of the reasons why we wanted to have this conversation today was also the fact that we wanted to have a conversation that catered to the experiences of our own community as communities of color, conversations amongst each other, conversations that don't necessarily kind of center whiteness, but more so talk honestly and openly about our relations to each other. And with that, I'm kind of going to go over introductions and I'm going to introduce myself. My name is Violeta Munera Guerrero. I'm the current Deputy Director at Families for Freedom. Anyone else?
And Donald Thompson, Director at Families for Freedom.
Jessie, an organizer at Families for Freedom.
And Fanta, organizer at Families for Freedom.
Awesome. So I guess now both Jessie and Fanta are going to give us a little bit of an intro into what our history is and who we are, what we do, and all of that good stuff.
Well, Families for Freedom started in 2002 when people with criminal convictions were facing deportation due to the 1996 laws, affecting not only their loved ones and families, but also the fear of being exiled from the country. Family for Freedom was formed to help support and advocate for those people that were detained, who had criminal convictions or still have criminal convictions, and we're fighting against deportation.
We provide a lot of advocacy and for people on the ground. So we are an organization that is made of members that are directly affected by the immigration and deportation system in America. So we are focused on our membership. We're led by our membership. And we create campaigns for people who need support for their immigration cases or when they need advocacy and organizational work. Families for Freedom is there to help them out. We work with people who are in detention as well. So people from detention call us and explain to us what's going on with them, and we do what we can to free them. The whole point of Families for Freedom is to try and get as many people free and walking as we possibly can. Let's keep as many families together as we can and stop deportations.
Donald, you're going to add something? You're going to say at least that we are membership led?
Well, yeah, sorry. I need to take the cues. But yeah, we are membership led, meaning from top to bottom, our board is basically over 52% directly affected persons, people who have lost their loved ones to immigration, people who have fought the immigration system, and our staff is similar the same way. Myself directly affected both by the criminal justice system and the immigration system, faced deportation, was detained. That's how our membership is, and members of staff are also in similar situation, having lost loved ones one way or the other, and fight, because in reality, what we are facing what is happening now in this current landscape is something that we have been dealing with since 2002, more so than now. It's a bit more hyped up, but nothing has actually changed for us as non-U.S. citizens with criminal convictions. So that's what we do.
Yeah, so maybe do we want to kind of tell folks what has brought us into Families for Freedom? How did we get here? How long have we been part of this organization? And does anybody want to kind of lead us into this?
I can go first. Long story short, like I said, non-U.S. citizen, green card holder with a criminal conviction, which made me removable based on that criminal conviction. Originally from the Caribbean, Antigua, 18 years after a conviction, I was stopped on my way coming back into the country, detained for a moment, fought the case to a standstill, and did what most people do when they come to Families for Freedom. We make a phone call, and somebody on the other end says, "How can I help you?" And that's how I got here. Some of the original founders would underline and said, "How can they help?" And that was a while ago. Here I am. I'm still here, still trying to help as much as we can.
Yeah, so with me, my family have been members of Families for Freedom since 2007. That was when my father was arrested and deported. So ICE had picked him up in July of 2007, and then he was deported that November. So then, between those months, my mom got connected to Families for Freedom. And honestly, since then, it's been like, and I was 11 years old at the time. I'm the oldest of 6. So my youngest brother was 1. So to him, Families for Freedom is his whole life. And, for me, I've been, in protests, we've gone to Washington, which was awesome as a kid, going to Washington and seeing how it works out there and joining protests. I've been doing this since I was like a child. And then in high school, I did an internship with Families for Freedom for about a year or a year and a half. Went away to college, came back, and now I'm back as an organizer. So I have a really long history with Families for Freedom. I've met one of the founders. They were still there when my family joined, and then, gone through different directors. I think, Donald, you're like the third one that my family has seen, I think. Third or fourth, something like, fourth, number 4? Yeah.
Yeah.
So
about the 4th.
Yeah, the 4th. So yeah, we have a really long history of family. They're basically family at this point, and Families for Freedom. So we're family at this point. Everyone knows everyone. And we're okay with each other. So that's my story.
So seeing family members being picked up by ICE or facing deportation kind of made me come into this field. Having family members also have worked in the past with Families for Freedom. Seeing my brother-in-law and my sister personally, the way they went through the system, just made me kind of push me over to come into Families for Freedom. And I'm also kind of tired of seeing the fact that a lot of the families, immigrant families, are always scared or in the shadows, and that kind of drives you to come into and do something about it. So here I am, as part of daughter of immigrants families that came here. I feel like the urge is here, so I'm here. This is why.
Thank you, Jesse. And I came into Families for Freedom about 3 years ago. I'm also the daughter of immigrants, of Colombian and Dominican immigrants. My dad was a border crosser. I am a first generation American. I've been somebody that's always been active in the social movements for liberation of people. When I was a child, I was very involved in the Puerto Rican political prisoners, Freedom for Puerto Rican political prisoners movement. And I think that when I moved to New York and I got familiar with the movement landscape, the mission at Families for Freedom really spoke to me because it was very close to the vision of society that I want to see, which is a world where liberation should be afforded for everybody. Nobody should be behind bars. And also because it is membership led and it is led by those that are most directly impacted by the system. And that really caught my attention. And I think that's really something that makes us stand out in the movement. It makes us kind of unique. So yeah, that was like a little bit of a intro about who we are, what we do. There's definitely more info online. You can check out our website and stuff. Here's some pics of our members, our actions and stuff. And yes, Jesse's belly. So I'm gonna be asking some guiding questions for this conversation that are not really meant to. This is not meant to be like a panel form. This is more to be a conversation of like how we usually talk to each other at work, which is very casually. So you might see us laughing, digressing, or I don't know, just calling each other out or something else. But yeah, the first question is, the first set of questions to guide us in this segment are going to be, how do you identify in terms of like race and ethnicity, as well as when did you first become aware of your individual racial identity, as well as your community's identity? So, juicy question.
I can start. So I identify as an African Black woman. And honestly, for me and my siblings, like since we are the children of Senegalese immigrants, growing up, we were always saying we're African. It was never African American. So that's how we identify as, because I identify as African and Black, obviously. And when I first became aware of my individual racial identity and my community identity, well, I'll start with community identity. So, like I said, we've always known we're African. So from the time, growing up in New York and like in the Bronx, when you speak to, at least in my experience and experience of like me and my siblings, when we speak to other people, our peers, and we ask people like, oh, where are you from? They always tend to say like their family's general nationality, I guess you can say. So like, if their family's from Puerto Rico, people will say I'm Puerto Rican. If they're from Senegal, like my family is, will say we're Senegalese. If they're from, Jamaica, they'd say Jamaican. Even if we were all born here, that's what we say. So I think I've always been aware of the fact that like, I come from African people and we're, that they were immigrants, always knew that we were part of an immigrant community. As for racial stuff, I wasn't super aware of the whole race thing because like I said, I did grow up in the Bronx, so I was always around like Black and Latino people, and the people that I was around never really pointed out the difference in skin color. And this didn't happen, I wasn't like made aware of the fact that I was like a Black person in this world full of like, or in this country, I guess, full of white people until I got to high school. And I was in an economics class and my teacher was absent, so we had a substitute, and the substitute wanted to ask a question like, why do you think there is such a great disparity in class between white people and Black people? Like Black people tend to be poor and white people tend to be like the rich ones. And there was this white kid in the class who just started going off on Black people and saying how they were lazy and you know, they all were on food stamps and never wanted to work, and they skipped school, never, you know, always dropped out of high school. So that's why they were all, like, most of them were poor. It had nothing to do with their skin. And he was just going on, and the whole class just turned around and like stared at me. And I was sitting in the back of the class. They all just turned and like stared at me because I was the only Black person in that class at that time. And it was the weirdest, like, it was upsetting and also like very strange that everyone had turned to me because I didn't know why they were turning to me. And then I was like, oh, it's because I'm Black, you know? And he's talking about Black people. And the school I went to was predominantly white and Asian. There were barely any Black people around. So, I mean, obviously when I first entered school, I noticed that. But then I was like really, like I really realized that like there were two very separate worlds when that kid started speaking that way. So yeah, I didn't want to be made to feel like I had to represent the entire Black race. And it also was strange for me, especially because I also, like I said, I identify as African. So I didn't really know, like he was talking about like African Americans, and I didn't really connect with that when I was younger. So I didn't know why everyone was like looking at me because I'm like, I'm clearly African. I don't know why you guys, but it was this whole weird thing. So yeah, that's when I came into realizing the whole Black and white thing.
Okay. I identify myself as a Hispanic first generation of a Mexican American, with really close ties to the Mexican community, cultures, and traditions. For me, my first language is Spanish, and English being my second. And the reason why I mentioned that is because once I started going to school, and English was like the basic, I guess, the first language you learn to speak, that you have to learn to speak actually, but like you have to adapt to that English, right? And then when I used to say, or I would go back home and do my homework, and then I come back from mom to school, my accent wasn't accepted. Like they would correct me in the way I would say certain things. Like I always use an example, like my mom would be like, oh, it was, and I would go to school, it was, right? And then and school, the teacher would be like, no, it's not was, it's was, right? So then you're kind of like, okay, so you realize you are treated a little different or viewed a little different, even if they don't mean to, maybe, or you just basically pointed out different, right? And then when the time when I felt mostly like communitized or racialized was when I started working in Harlem. And I still work in Harlem, being, Black community. I saw the difference towards Mexican people. The way, the way they looked at us, the ways why did we work in a community where Black people were only allowed to work, basically. Do not speak Spanish. Speak English. This is America. Even the way you eat, like sometimes even on your break, you will have like, I eat spicy food, right? And they just look at you like, oh, what are you eating that in front of, like, in a restaurant? But it's just things like that I started realizing as a teenager, that you are different, even if you don't want to seem to be different, That's when I started realizing for me.
Oh, well. Yeah, well, shit, I don't know when I realized that, obviously, me being that old, I can't remember that. But coming from a predominantly Black country, even though they're colored, there's class issues and stuff like that. I have been aware of class issues based on color. I don't know if you can actually separate them. So it's always a constant. And again, my growing up was more or less, we had more political awareness, whether or not we were told that. We learned that just by growing up in the community where we were. It was not as blatant in terms of an ism as you see here in America. I consider myself to be Black. Okay, that's what it is. Anywhere you go in the world, Black. People who identify you as African Black or Puerto Rican Black, even though nowadays you're hearing all of that. Black is Black. So that's how I actually experience Blackness. but also experienced racism and being the other. So I've lived in Montreal. Um, it is not as black as New York City. And, you know, you run into a whole bunch of things. I've been here for a while in New York. I remember there's some places where I never went to. I never went to Howard Beach because of the isms that used to come out of there. There's certain parts of Brooklyn that I didn't go to because, you know, it's a bunch of white folks and you might get beaten, that kind of thing. And it was happening. So my experience is the wholeness of, I've seen racism on all ends. I've seen prejudice towards me not being an American. Like, I play basketball, used to anyway. I was pretty decent at it. So coming here in my young age and playing basketball and beating the hell out of people who think basketball belongs to them, end up in some serious fights. Because the first thing we tell you, go back under the banana boat, go play soccer. And I'm just saying, first of all, ain't no banana boats happening right now. Ain't nobody coming here on no banana boats. And one, we can play this game called basketball. And that was in a black community. That was in the Bronx. It was anti-blackness. You know, it is when we get deep into the conversation about what happens when somebody manifests their prejudice. But for me, that was my experience. It's been a long one. It hasn't gone away. I have interracial children. I have interracial relatives, aunts, uncles, all that. So I come from a very rounded place in terms of when it comes to racial issues.
Yeah. Um, I echo a little bit of that, and I'm actually gonna call myself out at a time that I remember kind of asking Donald, like, "Oh, you have a white daughter," which felt so problematic and wrong. But it's just, yeah. When it comes to myself and my identity, I mean, I'm the daughter of immigrants that grew up in Puerto Rico. So racial identities are complicated in Puerto Rico because we really hold on strongly to the idea that we are this triracial ethnic group, that we are, you know, indigenous, white, and African. And there's truth to that, but there's also the reality that we're not all treated the same based on not only our skin color, but also some of our features, and that anti-Blackness is deeply rooted into the fabric of our society. And for me, growing up, I was not as eager to identify myself racially, or I just maybe didn't think as much about race, but I thought a lot about like nationality and like ethnicity, because people would always act very surprised when I said that I was Dominican, of Dominican heritage, just because of tensions between Dominicans and Puerto Ricans on the island, which it may not be as clear or apparent here in New York City, but in Puerto Rico at the time, and to this day, I believe, at the time that I was growing up, there was just a lot of anti-Dominican sentiment, and I would get responses like, "Oh, but you like you're Dominican, but you're kind of like not black or not dumb," which is very racist. It's a very racist and problematic thing to say. So I was always very aware that I was also categorized as an other for various reasons, and in the Caribbean, hair is a thing. It's very political, and my hair was always curly and frizzy, and it was considered bad hair. It was not attractive. It was a marker for Blackness. So within my Puerto Rican community, even though my skin color was white, I was not necessarily seen as blanquita. However, when I moved to New York City, that drastically changed. And that was the moment for me when I realized that I was perceived as white in the world, at least in the New York City world. And mainly because of my proximity to white Jewish people, because I get easily confused as perceived as Jewish, and Jewish community is a community that's somewhat powerful in New York City. So that proximity gives me a lot of advantages and benefits. Also, just being aware that in my story, in my history with like criminal, like enforcement with police, I was never questioned. My innocence was never questioned, even though I may have committed criminal acts in the past. So by just looking at me, my identity, how I'm perceived in the world is in a way that is non-threatening to a lot of people, and that is directly linked to my whiteness, and is the reason why I have no criminal convictions, and perhaps somebody that was darker than would right now be facing deportation on some of the charges that I would have caught if it wasn't for race. And that realization has become even more true working at Families for Freedom, working with people that do have criminal convictions. So those are some of the difficult conversations we have inside. And my whiteness is always put into question in the office, and people make so much fun of it. I'm the whitest person in the office. Sometimes I scare people in the office. But you know, I try to embrace it, and at the same time, I like to say that I don't want it to erase the Afro-ness that is in my culture, because I do feel like a Caribbean woman. I am a Caribbean woman, and culturally, I have many practices that come from African cultures, and my spirituality is grounded in Yoruba culture, which is from Africa. And you know, it's a complicated thing to talk about when we talk about, you know, race and ethnicity for some of us, and especially in the Caribbean region, which has so many identities. But yeah, that's kind of like it. So yeah, I don't know. Do we want to like? Well, like Jesse, I also like grew up in Spanish, so Spanish has also been like a point of contention for me in the U.S. But yeah, both. Donald.
No, I'm glad for all of this. It is the work that we do. Obviously, we have to deal with what has been inherently an inherent part of this country, which is racism. And it affects us in many, many different ways. And like I said, we're not focusing on the whiteness about racism. We're talking about, in a sense, even anti-blackness. As a non-US citizen, even before we get here, this is something I say all the time, is that we're told, don't hang out with African Americans. Like Fanta was saying, Fanta is African American.
I definitely am.
Jesse is Mexican American. You're gonna you're in America, you're born in America, you know what I mean? And you have to carry that burden or that mantle of an American. And it sometimes maybe it's a heavy thing to walk with, but that's what it is, you know. And when we speak about racism in America, like Jesse was saying, you live and work in a predominantly area of color, but if you end up being an other within that area, you're more than likely going to be subject to the prejudice and the isms of the dominant people, regardless wherever it is. And it is awkward. I'm glad that y'all haven't experienced racism to the point like, look, when I came here first, I worked in Queens, not Howard Beach. And I used to work overnight at the supermarket, only 2 hours. And 4th of July was the worst time to be in that area as a person of color. We would get chased, like I stood and fight once, but there were too many people, so I took off through an empty parking lot. And thankfully, somebody stopped and picked me up. That same night, and this is white folks attacking black folks, that same night, I found out that as people were going to the subway, people got attacked and hit with bricks. Like a guy got hit in the back of his head with a brick or a pipe or something like that. So that is racism doing some physical things. They didn't discriminate against me because I was a non-US citizen. They couldn't tell it. They just came at me because I was black. And I guess that's what they do when it's 4th of July, chase black people in that neighborhood. So those are some of the things that we experience, like what Jesse's going through, what Phantom so we go through. This is what racism, and that is what New York is kind of unique. It's kind of unique to how people view white supremacy and racism worldwide. But in America, there is an obscene streak of racism. It runs into every single thing. And there's anti-Asian, there's anti-Latino, there's anti-Black, there's anti. Maybe they should just put anti, instead of say America, they'll say anti-America or something like that. Anti-something, but yeah. That is the real life that I have lived here in America. And it's hard, like Violetta says, I do have an interracial child. It is hard how to explain to my youth that when you grow up, you're gonna have to face some of these crazy things. Because the world is not getting any better. And I think this conversation, as we go further, we get into that.
Yeah, there's so many antis, right? But I actually was thinking when you were saying that of like America with the 3 Ks, right? That's kind of what it feels like sometimes. Just because it's so heightened, and something that is very surprising, I guess, to people that are coming outside of New York City when they move in here, at least in my experience, is that you imagine New York City to be like a very racially diverse, ethnically diverse place, and it almost seems like this is like the dream, the future, utopia. And in my experience, what I've realized is that I have never seen so many acts of like racial violence, like at almost like a daily level. It is amazing how we continue to survive in this city because it's just in our face all the time. And I think that leads us actually to our second set of questions, which are based on, what are some of the racial stereotypes, stories, and biases that you grew up with and that you're more aware of now as you do this work, right? As we do this work with immigrants. And what are some new racial stereotypes, stories, biases that you picked up doing this work in the immigration field? Because we're only human, and it's impossible not to pick up some biases and stereotypes about people when you're doing this work. So does anybody want to start?
I can start.
One example that I was thinking about is the word art. Oh, go ahead, Jesse. Go ahead.
Go ahead and finish up what you were going to say. Your example. Okay, so as growing up, you like I said, you kind of hear things, but you don't really realize until you go through it. And I would say that one that I really hate the most is when they refer to, instead of saying immigrants, they just say Mexicans. And people don't realize that Mexicans are not the only immigrants that are trying to come or enter the United States. It's different people of different colors from different countries. But it's always, when it comes to the Spanish speaking, it's always the Mexican. And I used to hate it when I used to go to school and people would say, oh, the Mexicans crossing over. Oh, but Trump says the Mexican border, they're trying to put a wall because the Mexicans have, they're gang members, they're violent, they attack. they're rapists, murderers. But it's not only the Mexicans, you know, it's more than that. And that gets to the point that it's just irritating, because it's like I try so hard to defend my like my people. I always say like my people. But in reality, it's just that we have to actually view everybody else, not only myself, you know, like Mexicans, right? But I do hate the fact that they always use the Mexican word. And it's not only Mexicans, you know. You hear a lot of like the wetbacks, the beaners. We have a bunch of kids and they're born here, and we take the benefits, and we take Americans' jobs. Like, really, Americans want to be doing jobs that Mexican people work, you know, or to the point that cleaning toilets. I use always an example. American really wants to clean toilets, like, you know, just as an example. But yeah, that's one of the things that I see. And now that I'm working here at families, you hear more about their criminal convictions, right? Working at families, I have learned a lot, like especially the political words, but the criminal convictions, they always come up with a criminal conviction, right? Because they're murderers, because they're gang members, because they're rapists. It's like a label that we have that you can't just simply take off. So.
Yeah, I wanted to note that, like, also the what you're saying about the Mexicans is it's connected to like the class issue, right? And that it's also like this idea that all Mexicans, it's like a homogeneous group. When you have like Black Mexicans too and rich Mexicans too that come into this country and get like good jobs, like high-paying jobs, like there's commerce between Mexico and the U.S. So there's some people making money. And, there's Black people almost in every country in the world, I'm sure. So, this idea of like homogeneous group, but something that you made me think about in terms of convictions is how sometimes it's kind of weird because like sometimes we get upticks at families of like certain people getting picked up and it's certain ethnicities and it's for certain convictions. And I remember a while back, there was like this trend of like a lot of Central Americans, including Mexicans, getting picked up for DUIs. And I was like, yo, we have like a serious drinking problem. Like, it's like really bad. Like, it kind of feeds into the stereotype of like alcoholism or like, I don't know. But it's very interesting how we also see how we get criminalized by things that are kind of, I don't know, sometimes even part of our culture, like the Jamaicans that have, I don't know how many marijuana convictions, which is crazy. And some of them are facing deportation and have like 20-year-old criminals, like marijuana convictions that make no sense. And that is part of their culture. So, yeah,
and also like the way they have changed it into aggravated felony. Is that how you say it? It's just like, wow, even for smoking marijuana, which is something normal for a lot of us, I guess, back home. But they make it seem into an aggravated felony, a charge. And it's just like, if a citizen would do it, it wouldn't be the same. It wouldn't be labeled the same way. But because we are non-citizens, it's labeled a certain way.
Oops. I love the conversation, but so for anybody who's watching, these are the conversations that we regularly have within the office. And it makes it easier for us for when we go out and face these questions and these isms, because we've been out on the street talking when we do outreach and have people come and says, well, look, deport all of them. They shouldn't be in the country. And the person is looking at me, same color, same neighborhood, all of this, have the same stuff. And there is a lot of learning to happen and a lot of listening and a lot of teaching too. Not so much the preaching, but a lot of teaching has to go on where people can understand some of these places where we are at. Using the word Mexican, African, the N word, and all those things is part of the system that keeps us divided. So we can't come together, even though I'm looking at an African American, you can't tell the difference. You can tell the difference between me and Fanta because of maybe gender, but also we're both Black. You can't tell the difference between when you and Violetta, Jesse and Violetta speak because they speak in Spanish, so they could be. And so those are things that bind us, but then we have things that separate us. And when we talk about racism, it's not only manifested because of white on Black or whatever it is. It's an ism. And isms separate. That's what an ism is about. Like, I am different than you are. It creates a difference between what we do, what we say, how we live, and stuff like that. But isms, which I've written about it, isms can be bridged. And that is what we have to do ultimately, is to bridge, traverse the bridges that are already built, because there have been connections to Africa with African Americans. Everybody know Malcolm X. He did what he had to do. He did mad outreach to the African countries. He's one of the most famous people in Africa as an African American, beside Martin Luther King. Everybody know Malcolm X. Everybody is known with Malcolm X once you're coming from the continent. But yeah, when folks come here to America, they totally ignore that Malcolm X was an African American. And all the teachings and the links with Malcolm are no longer there. So we get siloed, and the Senegalese hang out on only 116, all the West Africans on 116. If you go to El Barrio, the Puerto Ricans don't like the Mexicans now because the Mexicans are getting too popular. And then it's kind of crazy. Like, I live in El Barrio, and it is funny as hell to see, one, the Puerto Rican Day Parade, which is great. It is great. And then you see 3 different Mexican parades or festival. You know, Mexicans, I'm just saying, they got about 5 different independents because they fought for that. And then when they come on the street, there is isms and there's tension. And it's crazy. We all live in the same neighborhood. You know, like, it's something that we're going to have to fight and have to work on, especially in the work that we do, because now that you see Black Lives Matter and people are looking at racism and prejudice and the system, structural system of the isms and racism, we can also focus the same way on immigration, because we are facing almost identical issues as non-US citizens, as immigrants, regardless of the color, the culture of difference. We're facing the same institutional attacks that is linked with the Black Lives Matter and the problems that marginalized people get. And we shouldn't forget indigenous people, nor should we forget poor whites, because it is a class issue when you get down to it. They may think that and there is a saying that white folks, even the poorest white folks, think that they're way better than Black folks. In reality, it is not so. And it goes to what Jesse had mentioned, that you don't compare jobs really, but some people will not do certain work because they think it's above or below them. And then some people have no other choice but to do certain works. And we see that going on right now with the COVID. The reason why so much of us dying is because we have to go do that dirty work. We got to go do the dirty work. And, you know, as we talk about racism and immigration, where we at, we have to put all those things in there.
Yeah, so, you know, about the whole thing with like African and like African American, like, you know, like I said earlier, me and my siblings, we grew up always just saying African. And I think, I mean, part of that is because we did grow up in an African household and we did grow up in New York, where everyone identifies as like, or in our experience, where everyone identified as like where their family was from. But also, another part would be like when my mom would always differentiate between Americans, the people who were born here, and then like people who are like of direct, like who know of their direct African descent. So like, you know, me and my siblings, we know where our family is like have roots in Africa. We know that's in Senegal and Guinea as well. But like the reason we never like identified as African, I mean, as American was because my mom would make those distinctions, and because she would try to like, if we did anything wrong, like if we did anything wrong, she would say it was because of the American in us, you know? So anything wrong, I'd hear her on the phone talking to her siblings back home in our language, just going off yapping and saying, these American kids, they don't do anything right, you know? And that's how, like, that's what you associate. That's what, like, in an African community, that's what they associate, like, Americanism with like, bad. And, like, Black Americans and African Americans with, like, not, like, bad stereotypes. That's what they do. So they, like, my mom always made it seem as if, like, you know, anyone who was born here and their parents were from Africa, they just automatically became bad. And that was what we grew up with. So we would always be like, no, we're African, blah, blah, you know, because we thought, you know, being American was not good. And not that it wasn't good, but like you just as a person weren't good, you know? And so I became like, I don't know, I guess I became super aware of that as a kid. But then like new racial stereotypes and biases that I like picked up while I was working with Families for Freedom, or like that were more, I don't know, grounded. Or I think growing up, you know, everyone always knew that whiteness, or as close as you can get to whiteness, was always good. And then on top of that, like I said, you know, American is bad. So I always assumed that like people from countries like India or Asia or like, I don't know, that they were just, they never had criminal convictions, that when they came to this country, they were coming because they just were seeking asylum and they just wanted a better life, and that they could never do any wrong while they're here. You know, they're hard workers, stuff like that. And then, you know, when you think about people coming from like, when I think about people coming from the Caribbean or like Mexicans or, you know, from Latin America, you automatically like, or I'm gonna stop saying you. I tend to like think, oh, maybe they're in detention because they have a criminal conviction. And you know, working in Families for Freedom, that was something that I wasn't aware that I was doing that, but I think I became aware of that after a while, and then I tried to stop doing that, because obviously we would come across people who didn't fit that, and like, you know, they would have criminal convictions and they were not Latin American or Black. They'd be like, you know, from India or they're Asian or something. So I think, and then, you know, white people as well, we do have white immigrants. People tend to forget that there are white immigrants in America. They come from other places and they do have criminal convictions. Some of them do have criminal convictions. So just, you know, those were some of the things that I came into realizing as I was working here. And it was just interesting. And I had to add, like, when my siblings and I realized that we were African American, that coming into that realization was the strangest thing. I remember we were just sitting down and we were like, because we were talking about like the racial tensions in America right now, right? And then we're like, oh, like when we go outside, even with our hijabs on, like especially with my brothers, they don't have anything that identify them as like African. They don't speak like they're African. They speak like they're from the Bronx in New York, you know? So that's when we realized, like, damn, like we're African American. This is our issue too. Like whatever's going on right now is not just an issue for, you know, people who've been here for generations, or Black people who've been here for generations. This is our problem too. When we go outside, they see us as Black at the end of the day, and we speak like we're from here. So we can't just try and separate ourselves from that by saying, well, we're African. Like, no, we're African American. And I think that realization, it kind of like silenced us for a little bit, because we were sitting there looking at each other like, this is strange. Like, we're not just African, we're African American. So changing that identity a little bit and separating ourselves from like those bad stereotypes, I think that was like a awakening moment, you know? So, yeah.
You want to say something, Donald?
No, I talk too much.
Yeah, no, that's deep, and that's one of the things that I think this this series, or yeah, we're thinking this might be a series of conversations, and this might be the first one. We might include like our members and other allies. But just to go back to what Fanta was saying, just this idea of some kind of superiority, like when you're not from the US, but then you settle here. Um, and I feel like I also like I'm guilty of that. But it's very interesting because when you live outside of the US is portrayed by media in such a powerful way that you really believe everything that they say about America or whatever. You believe that this is the smartest and most educated place in the world with the better educational systems, with all these like wonderful things, and then you get here and have so many realizations, and then part of you is like, well, I'm kind of like better than some of these people. Like our people are kind of like better than some of these people that are kind of here, like these Americans. And it's usually tied into like class and race, right? And it's very interesting because it is something we need to challenge in our community. And I think that's actually like a good segue into our kind of last discussion, which is around, what are some of the consequences of these ideologies that different immigrant groups in the U.S. have about not only themselves, right, but other Black communities, and how does this keep us divided in the immigration movement? Yeah. Additionally, like, what role can and should immigrant communities play in the Black Lives Matter movement in this particular moment? So, in a very Leninist way, saying like, what is to be done? Yeah, it's a mouthful, but I think we kind of started it, Fanta and I, with like the ideologies of like perhaps superiority or whatever, or inferiority. How do these like ideas keep us divided in the immigration movement?
I mean, like I said, like it makes us believe that we're separated from any of the issues and the racial problems that are in the country. So then we kind of put it in the back of our minds and we keep trying to convince ourselves that it doesn't apply to us, that we won't have these problems. And then as a result, we end up staying silent basically and complicit in what happens, not just to like other people, but it happens to us as well. And we try to convince ourselves that no, this can't happen to me. Like walking outside, I look African, they're not gonna come touch me, they're gonna know. But that they don't, you come to realize that that's this country, they don't care. You're black, you're black. They don't care where you're from. If you have black skin, you're black and you're inferior. In their minds, you're inferior. You're not, like, you don't really matter. You're not someone who they should care about. So I think for us, just not like separating ourselves from the Black community in here, in America, is important. And I mean, technically, when you think about it, Black people in America sort of go through the same, or they've gone through the same things as like immigrants, in terms of like family separation. We can talk about slavery all the way back then. Like people were being taken from their families on the coast of Africa or in countries of Africa. When they had families here, when they had kids here, they were torn away from them to be sold to other plantations. Even now, people, especially like Black men, are being picked up and thrown into jails, and they have families. So it's like, it's not that our experiences are really not that different. And I think we need to be aware of that, and we need to stop trying to separate ourselves from Americans and divide and conquer. That's what they do. That's how they win. So if we don't band together, if we don't unite, then we can't really change much about what's happening in this country. So I think, I don't know, in terms of the role that immigrant communities can play in the movement, the Black Lives Matter movement, like I said, just knowing that it's basically almost the same experiences, like very similar, if not the same experiences, and just standing with them, you know, realizing we have the same goals. Most people want to end detention, whether it's criminal detention or immigration detention. We don't need people sitting in jail cells for years on end for something that they shouldn't be in jail for. Like we talked about the marijuana convictions. Like, you know, if it's normal back home, people do it all the time. And then you come here and then for something like a plant that you decide to smoke, you can be thrown into jail for years. And if it was a conviction you got years ago, it can come back if you're an immigrant to bite you in the butt, and you can end up being thrown into jail again. You know, immigration detention, and you know, we just need to realize that we basically are one and the same, and we're fighting the same fight. And if the immigrant community comes into that realization, just working with Black Lives Matter can change a lot of what goes on in this country. I don't know what specific roles we can do, but like I just think that's like a first step, just knowing that we're fighting the same fight, basically.
Well, I honestly think that the idea that we have to stop those ideas that we have that who belongs here and who doesn't, and who do we have to push out this country just to belong here. And I feel like this would be a good example. Working in the restaurant one time, these little kids came in and were acting up, and I told them that they had to leave, and they came out to me as me being racist. I wasn't felt like I wasn't being racist. I was just letting them know that they had to exit the restaurant because it's not a playground. And their comment, this was back when Trump was almost being elected, and they said, "Oh, shut up, Mexican. You know, Trump is gonna come in and he's gonna throw you out." And I said, "Have you heard yourself? Like, if he throws us Mexicans out, who you think comes out next? You know, just because you have that idea that you belong here because you're black or you were born here, not realizing that I'm also born here, but it's just the fact that we fight against each other. You know, there's attacks, there's verbal abuse, there's comments like those that makes you realize, like, you know, what's going on, because these are kids and they're just the next generation that's coming up afterwards, right? What's going to happen when they get older? All right. And just that idea, the mentality that right now when COVID started, or what happened with COVID, there was a lot of people dying, and it didn't choose who was, you know, who was on the top, right? It was mostly affected our poor communities, the minorities, right? The people that are actually fighting against each other instead of actually sticking together in order to fight this movement. And the reason why I mentioned that, when I started hearing like the Black Lives Matter protests, I heard friends or family members saying, "Oh, you know, honestly, like, oh, you know, these black people just try to do chaos, you know, or just doing protests because." And I said, no, they do have a point, because if we don't help them out, or we don't stick together as the minorities that we are, then what's going to happen when it happens to us, to the Mexican community? You know, it could be that someone, the police can be attacking the Mexican, and who's going to stand up for us if we don't stand up together as a whole, as whole communities, as whole minority communities? Who's going to do it? You know, who's out there to say, okay, put a stop to this? And one of the roles that I feel like that we can do is, I find this conversation really helpful, because we are all together in some way, connected, and we're here and we're trying to do something about it. That's just my say.
Well, that was two powerful conversations. And we're privy to these conversations on a not necessarily regular anymore because COVID has kept us out of actually talking to each other and talking with each other. Um, I feel y'all, and again, been here for a moment. I've seen a whole bunch of things where, and y'all know what I say, that if we don't come together, there's no way that either we are going to win anything that's lasting as non-U.S. citizens or immigrants, neither will Afro Americans, the marginalized, win anything that is lasting if we don't combine as marginalized people. So we got examples. They put to rest John Lewis yesterday. John Lewis, he did as much as he can. He asked us to continue the fight. And he stood up for a whole bunch of things that most people wouldn't understand. He was for immigration in the way that we understand it. He was for a whole bunch of people's rights and stuff like that. And you must fight. But key card is what he fought for, which is the Voting Rights Act, which is what he's probably going to be known for, is still under threat because we weren't strong enough to hold on to what we want. If you go and do an analysis and check it out, is that we also, in that fight, started to splinter. Well, I'm going to vote, at one point, Latinos were considered to be Hispanic. So you have the Hispanic caucus who only looked about the rights of Hispanic folks so that they can vote. That division weakened the things that we won before. And there's a thing that says, we are of color, so we are of kin, meaning that we are one. We keep saying it, but how far out do we mean it? They killed Amadou Diallo, his famous Amos, because he was an African who got shot reaching for his wallet. And everybody knows 41 bullets that they shot him with. They shoot up people in California, in LA, Mexicanos, Salvadorans, and you look at the name and people are coming out for all of this. And we only coming out together when we mourn. We hardly have anything to come out together to where we can celebrate. Look at what brings us all together, the world together, is a white man kneeling down on a black man's neck. And for one of the first times I saw in New York City in a demonstration, Africans from the African continent identifying themselves as Africans from the African continent in that protest because they were upset. And I've been in a lot of protests, and it is rare to see that identity coming out, and it was a good thing. We have a long way, and we say the same thing over and over. It's a marathon, but what is not said afterwards, it's a relay. It's a marathon relay. So people who have done the work before, they already crossed the bridge. We have to take up the baton and then pass it on to the next, which is what I'm doing actually, because I'm gonna pass it on to one of y'all, and I can go and chill on the beach or something like that. But on a serious note is that we have to hold on to what we win. We can't hold on to it in a selfish way. So we hold on to the things that we win, that is for the collective, and we defend it as a collective. We don't defend it because I'm an Afro immigrant, so I'm only going to deal with Afro immigrants. We have lived through that already. I'm not going to defend it because I'm an American Latino or Latino American, I don't even know how they call it, and I'm going to hold that down. I'm not going to hang out, Mexicans not going to hang out with Salvadorans because shit, they're going to say we are MS-13 or something like that. We have to come together. It's the only way that we're going to win. And we have to come together, not by, how would I say, taking away anything from the Black Lives Movement. We cannot be involved in the movement and make it about us as immigrants. All we do is replicate the stuff, and then people will say, oh, the attention has to be about you immigrants of that and that. And that in itself caused some division. We have to be sincere when we say solidarity. And it's not solidarity where we only turn up in demonstrations. It has to be solidarity in going to people's meetings, meeting our neighbors. Because even in our living in New York, you be living in a building and you don't even know the people in them on your floor by their first name. Sometimes you just go hi and you disappear. I'm not talking about you, Jesse. Y'all own that building. Yeah, that's that Bronx thing that y'all got. Like y'all on like what, 4 different floors? Ain't nobody coming up there and run up on y'all because y'all are like that. But I'm just saying that Violetta, you spoke about it. Coming to New York and how crazy it is and how, you know, it's 1 million people here, 9 million, 11 million people, and sometimes you feel so alone. You know, Gil Scott-Heron has a song that New York is killing me. 8 million people in here and he didn't even have a friend. And that is what this place does to us. But we have to get beyond that, hold on the space along with other people, but don't hold it on like if it's ours, but hold on that common so everybody can come in and everybody can go forward. And I just want to say one more thing about the Bronx, so we don't keep saying it's just Brooklyn. There are places in the Bronx, when I came here first, that we could not go either. So it's not just Brooklyn. Trogsnet was a place that you don't go because you're out there and people be calling you all kind of names, people be throwing bottles at you. So you had places where you did not go. I'm sure Trogsnet is probably, I hope nobody from Trogsnet is watching the live feed, but Staten Island. I've been to Staten Island for maybe 3 times in my life. You know, in some place I was rushing to go. You know, Eric Gardner brought, there are our people there, African folks over there who were facing some real prejudice because of Ebola, when the Ebola crisis had hit. That you had African black people telling black people, you bring in Ebola into our country. So that was whack, all right? That was whack. This is people living there and people accuse them of carrying Ebola. I'm sure it's the same thing now with COVID, that our Asian brothers are facing the same whack shit. So, can we say that? Yeah, I guess I can say that. It's already said. We're facing the same thing. Asian folks are facing the same thing of the prejudice, which means it's not just how we turn up for Black lives, how we just turn up for our people, the marginalized people. And we find ways, we have to go forward.
I agree. The building where I live, actually, Donald, my family was the first set of people that actually came in, you know, our color. And then now there's like at least 10 Mexican families living in this building. But yeah, it was mostly white people and people with money. Like, so yeah, coming into this building, it was kind of like, my mom used to say it felt weird because the community itself was kind of more white, and it was like she would explain to us like Riverdale, like part of the richest part of Riverdale. That's how it was here, you know. And then us moving in was just like, oh, somebody moved in, right? But then people, you know, families started bringing more family, and then you start here, so you know, so probably be like 10 different families that live in this building that are Mexican, and it's just kind of, you know, it's kind of turning into little Mexican areas.
I know, and that is also the reality of America, okay? That is why when people say they're holding on to something, in particular New York is changing constantly. So we have gentrification and stuff like that, but New York always changes. And unfortunately, the people who really should say who comes and who goes, we don't even mention them easily because we think they're not there. They're First Nation people here still in New York City. Prospect Park, from my understanding, was First Nation land that was leased to the federal government. Those people are still here, you know, and as we talk about Black lives and what we do in immigration and stuff like that, we also need to pay attention to that and reach out to them and form whatever solidarity that we can, but not just a talk about solidarity, actual transformational solidarity that we can go and hang out at the power hours without feeling we're tourists or spectators, you know. All right, that's much.
Something I really wanted to talk about as I get into this like question is that one of the things that I really love about us at Families is that we really are multi-ethnic, multi-generational group. And that has given us the opportunity in many ways to build relationships across sectors, across identities in a very powerful way. And as I think about what is like the future, what can be done, I really think that we must be reshaping the way we relate to one another. And really be forming these kind of bonds where we're comfortable enough to really call each other out or call each other in, and talk to each other from a place of like sisterhood or brotherhood, of like not from a place of attack and aggression, but from a place of let's be better for each other and just change the relational dynamic. And that to me is something that is really easy to say, but really, really hard to do in the real world. I mean, we talked about when we go out to the streets and do outreach and talk to the people in our communities on the street. And sometimes they say really horrible things about basically themselves because they're talking about their own community. So like we say horrible things about each other. And it makes me think a lot about Fanon, who's a Caribbean thinker on colonial struggles and identity. And he's really informed my ideology, my political life. So something that really always stays with me is the importance of just killing the internal colonizer in us. Because we, as people of color, and he says this in one of his books, like, we internalize everything that the worst thing that the colonizer says about us. Like, we find it so easy to internalize, like, the horrible messages that the colonizer says about us. And I think that's one place that we can start within our communities, being like challenging people to say, where did you get this message? Because I literally had this conversation with people on the street, and it's maybe taken me like an hour, close to an hour. So it's not a simple conversation, but it's like, where do you get this message? Like, who gave you this idea? Where did you see this? Where did you read this? Because it's horrible. And once you start understanding that person's story and trying to connect with that person on a authentic way, honest way, and like really listening to what they're saying, you can find common ground. And it is actually very possible to change their mind. It is not an impossible thing to do, to change someone's mind. I've seen it happen. It takes time, it takes patience, it takes flexibility too, but it can be done. And I think that all of us can have a role as people of color, as immigrants, as, you know, first generations, in engaging in those conversations and changing that, challenging those ideas. But also we really have to be honest. We in the immigration rights movement, we have to be like uncomfortably honest with each other and say, when we're fighting for many of our communities, um, the immigration rights movement in many ways has a large portion of it has also become very depoliticized. And we fight from this angle of like charity. That is like, we need to help people. And sometimes we don't see it as political as it should be. And we also don't understand how some of the people that are coming into this country are people that have that very colonized mindset and that come here to reproduce the ideas of the oppressor. So it's not an easy conversation. It's not necessarily what everybody wants to hear, because we really want to buy into the good immigrant, bad immigrant narrative, and it's usually constructed around criminality, rarely around like the political. But the truth is that some of our communities are coming to this country with ideas to reproduce oppression. And we also must face that reality and really acknowledge that we have a lot of political education work to do amongst ourselves in order to really become the allies that are needed for a liberation movement that cares for everybody, but that also like centers like Black life and Native American life, First Nations life. So I don't think there's like an easy way to do this, or it's not like a one pill solution. But it's definitely a start. And also, just from the legal end, we need people that are really brave, that are brave enough to really take on the structure. Because when we say Black Lives Matter in immigration, we also have to understand that those that are really feeling the brunt of like the state violence and like detention and violence are mainly Black people or darker skinned people. And those people are languishing in prolonged detention, and they have nobody. Some of them have nobody. So they are just forgotten. And it's an invitation for our immigrant rights community to really think about where can energy go if we really want to uplift the struggle of Black people in this country. But that's just some of my reflections as we kind of get close to the closing. And yeah, I want to open it up for you all to share some last maybe thoughts, remarks, reflections.
Well, I would just, you said the way forward, but what you said there in regards to Black folks languishing in the detention centers, it is a real reality for us because we see it. Those are the people. But it's not only Black folks, but there's just way too much overrepresentation of Afro immigrants who are in prolonged detention. There's a uniqueness to that. And yeah, we need people to be brave enough to take on these cases, or at least just to get people free. I think Fanta started out this whole conversation about, we just about freedom. Freedom, one, to get out of those cages. And then it's on to the other person how to utilize that freedom. But when you really look at the disadvantages of being a Black person in America, whether that immigrant or not, Most often, we see ourselves languishing in either prison, men and women, homelessness, men and women, or in immigration detention centers where we are, again, languishing and losing a lot. Because the reality of Afro immigrants is that, except for most recently, we were admitted into the country, meaning we came not across a physical border more often than not, but we came in on visas, refugees, something. So the government said, come in. We cannot go back to some of these places. And it is detrimental to a whole bunch of things. And there's a comparison of our families and our people being, again, marginalized, downtrodden, and calls for the way forward that we must connect, and we must connect sincerely.
And I guess that ties into working on the legal end and legislation. Just one of the things that families, or one of the pieces of legislation that Families Freedom is supporting right now, is the New Way Forward Act. Okay, so we have a whole campaign going, and it's not just Financial Freedom. There's a large group of organizations who are supporting and pushing for this act to pass. And what this act does is it repeals a lot of the harmful pieces of the 1996 laws. One of which is having mandatory detention. So for immigrants who come to this country who have criminal convictions, for most of them, especially if it's considered a felony in the immigration world, they are mandatorily detained. So, and the reason why we're trying to push back on that is because there are some convictions that are considered felonies in immigration law that are not felonies in criminal law. So they get amped up to felony charges, and because of that, people are thrown into detention. So we're trying to repair that. The New Way Forward Act is going to give discretion back to judges and bring back due process to those who are going through the immigration system. So before the 96 laws, judges could consider a person's circumstances to determine whether or not they should stay in the country. If they were going to basically exile them. And if you had a conviction that was 15 years behind and you did your time, the judge can consider that. You had U.S. citizen children and other family members who are U.S. citizens, they consider that. If you had a job, if you were here supporting family, then they would consider that, and that could get you freedom, instead of having you excluded and exiled to another country or going into detention. So the New Way Forward Act is trying to get back to that, because after 96, they changed all of that. The judges no longer had discretion. They could no longer consider all of those circumstances. So people were just judged essentially just based on their criminal convictions. You had a criminal conviction, you're thrown into detention, and now you're deported. The New Way Forward Act also is trying to end the engagement between local police and ICE. So basically 287Gs, or even if they're not officially in law, just trying to end the pipeline between the criminal system and the immigration system. And they also, another important aspect of moving forward is to end the criminalization of people who are crossing the border, which is illegal entry and re-entry. So that's a felony, even though in the Constitution, it's a whole contradiction, because in the U.S. Constitution, if you're on U.S. soil, you can ask for asylum, but then in law, if you come in without permission, without a visa, you're a felon. doesn't make sense. They go against each other. But of course, anyone who comes and crosses the border, even if they ask for asylum, they're thrown into detention. And because they cross the border without permission, without having the visa and all of that, they have this felony conviction, or they get this felony charge. And because of that, they're mandatorily detained. So it's like a lot of it, works with each other, ties into each other. So the New Way Forward Act is aiming to end that, to end the criminalization of people crossing the border and asking for asylum, entry and re-entry laws. But yeah, I think that's, for the most part, that's what the New Way Forward Act would do. So it really would benefit our community, the immigrant community, and reduce the incarceration rate in America. It's really high. Everyone knows this, even with just a criminal system. So the New Way Forward Act would just make it easier for people, for immigrants, to be able to come here and just basically just live their lives, and make it easier for them to get the documentation that they need. And yeah, I think that's most of what it is. So people, please support the New Way Forward Act. If you're watching this, you need to support it. It'll help the communities immensely, keep families together, and hopefully stop or drastically reduce deportations.
Any other closing remarks? I guess we should maybe mention quickly, like, some of the other campaigns. Yes, we are supportive of the Freedom All campaign, which is to get people free from detention. It's pretty straightforward. We know that a lot of folks, like, that COVID thrives in spaces where conditions of hygienic conditions are poor, where people are in close proximity and cannot have social distancing. We are aware of spikes in cases inside of facilities, detention facilities. So wherever you are, there's many efforts going on. We have the link right here. This campaign is also tied into, maybe Donald, you can talk a little bit more about it, like the Shut Down Etowah campaign, where we recently heard that at least like 20 people were tested positive for COVID in Alabama. So yeah, can you talk a little bit about that, Donald?
Yeah, it's definitely part of the Freedom All campaign, but the situation in Alabama is getting drastic. Just on the outside, look at the numbers and how the cases in the state is rising, along with the deaths. And like Violetta says and CDC says, holding people in congregate situation is only going to amplify the amount of cases, hospitalization, and more than likely death. So the Shut Down Etowah campaign is happening. Please log in, check out what they're doing, support as much as you can. There's a fund to try and help people put money on the commissary so they can buy some of the things that might or might not be available. And also in the hope that if people do get released, that we can actually put them in places where they can quarantine if they need to be quarantined in certain places, but also help them on the way. And I have to say the same goes for the Shut Down Berks Detention Center, which is a family-based, detention center. It's a jail, and they're actually holding children there. Yeah, they're holding children there. Tomorrow they're going to have an action at the governor's. There's going to be an action tomorrow. Please go online, check out their website, Shut Down Berks campaign. It's mad important. And just before we go, is that a judge ordered ICE to release these children. They were given an extension. The extension ran out on Monday. As of now, hardly anybody got released. The United States government is giving families an ultimatum: either we release your children and let your children be released out of detention, you stay in, or you keep your child locked up. So they're giving families ultimatum to separate. That is where we at, and it doesn't matter. There's a whole bunch of Haitian and African families up in Pennsylvania that needs support. So look at the Shutdown Books campaign also.
Yes. And yeah, we were part of a very powerful action recently at Berks, and we got to see the families, and it's really heartbreaking to see children, babies inside of a detention facility. Nobody, not children for certain, should be in an environment like that. And as we close up, I want to say thank you. I think there's links to support our work. There's links to sign up to our newsletter. Wherever you're watching from, our members are everywhere. We've lost a lot of people, so there might be people watching this from Liberia, from Jamaica, wherever you are. We're sending you love.
Japan.
We hear you, and we're still in the fight. And yeah, thank you for watching. Anybody else? Goodbye.
Thank you for watching.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.